I'm going to open this presentation pretty much as a continuation of last month's age reversal update. I concluded that presentation with the findings from a study that was released just a few days before that. Just a few days before my March 28th, 2019 talk, this study came out about obese mice and the multiple problems they have, just like obese people. But when they gave the obese mice senolytic therapy, and they gave them dasatinib and quercetin, like most of the senolytic studies are done, they were able to improve and reverse the pathological markers associated with obesity. And this is a rather significant finding because data came out just a week ago that 40% of the American public is obese, another 40% is overweight. So we have 40% obese, 40% overweight, and it's causing us to die a lot sooner. To put this into perspective, these are maps presented and produced by the Centers for Disease and Control. And you can see as it relates to diabetes in adults, 1994, there wasn't a whole lot of it. So 1994, not too bad. 1996, 98, every 2 years, we see it worsening. We've got a diabetes epidemic in the United States. And as we move forward to more recent years, we see this spreading. Yeah, like a plague. If you remember that movie Outbreak, and they showed how if that infection left that city, the whole country would be wiped out. That's literally happening with the prevalence of diabetes amongst United States citizens, amongst adult population groups. They are killing themselves through poor lifestyle choices and failure to control their glucose levels. This is an amazing problem. And then when you look at these slides that CDC has produced, Centers for Disease Control, the top are the obesity data going from 1994 to 2015. And it truly is a plague. It is impacting the entire country. And right beneath that, though, are the diabetes maps that we showed initially. And you can see the correlation. As the country is growing heavier, we have this chronic problem of diabetic complications that is going to bankrupt our healthcare system. It's going to shorten lifespans. It's going to cause immense suffering amongst the people who are affected. And here we have some data indicating that a simple solution, the senolytic therapies that a number of you are self-experimenting with right now, and that there are some good studies indicating they can be effective against osteoarthritis, pulmonary fibrosis. We have a potential solution here. So I hope that people watching my presentation, and it's not just the people watching it live, we are recording, and these live recordings are then sent to thousands and thousands of people who we hope will look at this data and say, let's do a study on obese people to see if we can't get the same benefits that were shown in those obese mice. Now, heart failure is a topic we've talked about frequently here at this institution, and we do so because it's so prevalent. About 8 million Americans suffer congestive heart failure. Not all of them even know it. They just think they're getting old. They're running out of breath. They're not as energetic as they used to be. A lot of times, their hearts are simply failing, and that is what their problem is. And the good news is technology is improving if we have access to it, so much so that if you have heart failure and you were at a very high risk of sudden death, well, compared to 1995, you're 44% less likely to have a sudden death event in response to a chronic heart failure condition. The problem is it's not uniform. In this map, and by the way, I do like maps because it reveals a lot of information as to how much control we have over how long we're going to live and how healthy we're going to be. The dark areas of that map show very high incidence rates of sudden death in heart failure patients. Very, very high incidence rates. And if you look at those areas of the country, they reflect population groups who don't take care of themselves, who don't engage in healthy lifestyle choices, and often they don't have access to high-quality health care. advances in conventional cardiology and advances in knowledgeable people's understanding about how to live longer, it's enabling people to not die from heart disease at the rates that they used to. So we look at South Florida, New York City, Los Angeles, San Francisco. Those people, even though they have heart failure, they're not dying at the incident rate that is occurring in Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, North Texas, Oklahoma. These are areas, unfortunately, where people are not taking advantage of technology to live longer. So the topic of this presentation tonight, and again, the reason this is so important, this information to disseminate, is that the people watching this, not just live right now, but who will be watching it over the next month or two, they have the ability to initiate clinical trials in people to use the technologies I'm going to propose right now to see if we cannot enable older people to grow biologically younger. Two factors that I'm going to discuss. And this study came out this year. Virtually every study I'm talking about tonight came out in 2019. It shows you how rapid new data is emerging to tell us that we can live a lot longer if we pay attention. But this study was fascinating. They did biopsies on heart cells of people aged 32 to over 80. They did biopsies on living hearts, and what they found is that if you're over age 70 and have cardiovascular disease, half of your cardiac progenitor cells are senescent, meaning they're not functional, but they are injuring surrounding cells that are healthy. Senescent cells, as we know, damage healthy cells, and they accelerate aging. So this study showed that people with heart disease, well, they have a lot of senescent cells in their hearts, and it might be a good thing to get rid of those cells. Now, this flow chart will help you explain a little bit what progenitor cells are. They originate often in the bone marrow as stem cells. Stem cells are not specifically differentiated, but they do eventually differentiate into tissue-specific progenitor cells, and then those progenitor cells, they produce functional cells. Without functional cells, we wouldn't be alive. And we need a continuous pouring out of fresh functional cells from our progenitor cells in order to sustain healthy cardiac output. So this study, again, looked at a number of different parameters showing older people with heart disease, well, they have a progenitor cell deficiency and they have a lot of senescent cell damage. And we know that aging decreases our progenitor cell health. We know that. We've known that for a real long time. That's not something that's brand new right now. But what they did in this study is what so many other scientists are doing. They used dasatinib and quercetin, and they were able to partially rejuvenate the progenitor cells. They were able to cause those hearts in these heart failure situations to rejuvenate, to remodel their structure so that they could once again be functional. So what we have here is a potential way to reverse congestive heart failure, something that kills hundreds of thousands of Americans every year, affects about 8 million, is costing a fortune in hospitalizations and rehospitalizations. These people go through a downward spiral that is very, very frustrating for doctors, for patients, for their family. They have to deal with the fact that people with congestive heart failure are not getting the benefits. So this study indicating there could be a therapeutic approach right now to reverse heart failure, and we urgently need new studies, not just to eliminate the senescent cells, but to restore progenitor cell activity. This was not the first study this year, by the way, that indicated that senolytics could be effective. We reported on this study just a couple months ago. It came out in January, and it showed that when you use dasatinib and quercetin, you remove senescent cells, you improve cardiac function. And the authors of this study also said it's time to investigate the use of senolytics in people with heart failure, as it may very well extend their lives and save their lives. So this is a major, major breakthrough. We need to validate how effective these senolytic therapies are, and we need to do a number of studies at a number of different institutions in order to ascertain what should people be doing. We do have a senolytic protocol that's been used in one study that we helped fund. It was in osteoarthritis patients. They got spectacular results. And then people at Mayo Clinic, they used a similar protocol, not the identical one, on people with pulmonary fibrosis, and they demonstrated safety and they demonstrated partial efficacy. So we've got some human data on the senolytics, and it's not so much the dosing. At this point, we're wondering how frequently should people engage in a senolytic protocol. The current strategy is at least once a year, dasatinib and quercetin, high-dose quercetin, dasatinib, and based on body weight, and do it just week one dose, and week 2, the second dose, 2 doses a year. But some people are doing 3 doses a year, 4 doses a year. We don't know how frequently people, as they grow older, should be purging their body of senescent cells. That's where more research needs to occur. So, the idea of getting rid of the accumulated senescent cell burden and then restoring healthy progenitor cell function through a brand new mechanism I'm going to describe is absolutely astounding. The potential to enable older people to grow younger. So again, definition of a cardiac progenitor cell and how to restore it. We need them. Without progenitor cells, all those cells that are used up through our normal daily existence, well, they start to, unfortunately, then give out, and our tissues give out, our organs fail, and we die. The good news is it is possible to both restore and renew our progenitor cell niches in a way that we can potentially reverse heart failure and virtually every other disorder. And just again, bring you up to date on what progenitor cells are and how they can function in 2 different ways. They emanate in the bone marrow from stem cells, but then they have niches in different parts of our body where they then spew out progenitor cells. And that progenitor cell can either be used to make a functional cell. In this case, it's a cardiomyocyte, an endothelial cell, a smooth muscle cell in the heart. That could be a beneficial factor if we can produce more cardiac progenitor cells. But the other direction that a progenitor cell can go in is to self-renew. It can restore its own energy levels, its own functionality to continue producing fresh functional cells. So this is really good news that we know how, through several different mechanisms, to restore progenitor cell function, to renew existing progenitor cells and produce new ones. So these are 3 different ways, and there's actually many more, that we could theoretically reverse aging in people if we only put enough effort into it. Now, this study was published a year and a half ago, but it recently came to our attention. We've been investigating it for the last 2 to 3 weeks intensively. It showed that there is a particular type of cardiac progenitor cell called a cardiosphere-derived cell. The acronym for it might be CDC, but I don't like acronyms, so I'm going to continue to call it a cardiosphere-derived cell. And they did some research, and they found when they were able to put these into older animals, it was able to produce, of course, fresh functional cells. That's good for people with heart failure, but it had a side benefit. It appeared to reverse aging in a systemic manner. It wasn't just rejuvenating the hearts of the old animals, they were growing young systemically. Their whole body was growing young in response to these cardiosphere-derived cells. What they do to get healthy ones is they go to younger animals and younger people, and they pull out some of their healthy cardiosphere progenitor cells, and they multiply them. And if you look at this data here, when cardiosphere-derived cells were transplanted into old rats, wow, gene expression improved in 85% of the genes. And if you want a definition of aging, one of them can be the loss of healthy gene expression that we had in our youth. We lose our healthy gene expression, and this causes systemic deteriorations. The telomeres in the hearts of these animals lengthened. And I get that question probably more than any other question is, what can we do to elongate our shortening telomeres? And it looks like these cardiosphere-derived progenitor cells may be a way to do that. And they were able to show that in response to these cardiosphere-derived cells, they were able to improve ejection fraction and other measures of cardiac health. So we've got a real potential breakthrough here. And this is the exciting data about the in vivo effects in whole animals when cardiosphere cells were transplanted. Not only were their hearts getting better, but their exercise capacity increased 20%. They lost about 30% of the body weight. That's a big problem with older people. They start to accumulate excess body weight and they die sooner. hair regrowth, inflammatory markers reduced. This is systemic age reversal, and it's coming from the heart. It's coming from a cell that originates in the heart, and they're using technology to systemically put it into old animals. This is absolutely dynamic, and these were the benefits as it related to telomerase. Telomerase enables our telomeres to lengthen, and there were 4 to 6-fold increases in telomerase activity in response to these cardiosphere-derived cells. And as the telomerase activity improved, the telomeres lengthened, about 37%, by the way, in the heart. We don't have any other way of making that happen at this point except potentially through this mechanism. By the way, they not only were using the cardiosphere-derived cells, they were using the exosomes that are secreted by the cardiosphere-derived cells. It may be that the exosomes are the most impressive and important way to use this to regenerate cellular structure. Now, this is a graph, a chart out of the published study, and again, it's going to be a little bit hard to read here, but one of my reasons for putting this on the screen is, again, thousands of people are going to listen to what I'm saying right now, and if some of them have the ambition to take this technology and move it forward, they're likely to design a clinical trial. We know aging associated with shortened telomeres, and that's also associated with heart failure. Shortened telomeres and heart failure, they go hand in hand. They have, unfortunately, reduced regenerative capacity when you have shortened telomeres. And we now know that cardiosphere-derived cells secrete exosomes that can lengthen telomeres and reduce the senescent cell burden. We don't always need dasatinib and quercetin to remove senescent cells. Improved immune function will do it. There's a couple of different ways to do it, and this looks like a brand new way to make that happen. So the benefits of longer telomeres. This dense slide details the benefits that they were able to validate in this study, and there's been a bunch of other studies afterwards that consistently are showing similar results. This is from the published study again. I don't expect you to read it, but it just shows the elongation of telomeres in response to cardiosphere-derived exosomes or cell transplants. Absolutely spectacular. Again, a bigger picture of the diagram that was so generously provided by the authors of the study. They were kind enough to put web links to the published study and let us copy that to present it to everyone who wants to see it. So this is a company that is studying cardiosphere-derived cells for the treatment of muscular dystrophy. And that's impressive. It'd be nice to save those people, but our mission here is to save older people from extinction. And we'd like them to focus more on utilizing technology that they're at the forefront of to potentially reverse aging in people. The good news is there's lots and lots of studies that have been coming out that validate everything you've heard tonight. So we're seeing the results in other studies to help validate what was done in this study. And I want to remind the group, 10 years ago, which is a long time ago, the first stem cell transplant was done at Cedars-Sinai. And they got partial benefits that were shown, and they validated safety. And the problem is it's 10 years where they were hoping to have done something, and we're still waiting for a way to rejuvenate aging heart muscles. And this is a diagram from Cedars-Sinai showing how the transplanted stem cells were able to partially regenerate a person with heart failure. And it's disappointing that 10 years has gone by, and we still are not incorporating this into clinical practice. These are the methods that were used by the Cedars-Sinai scientists to induce some cardiac regeneration, and it's really very simple. And I want to show this because for people who say that sounds too complicated, it really isn't. It was done 10 years ago. It can be done better today. We just have to get people to go out and do it. People who, like me, want to see aging and death disappear. Now, this is a different topic, but it deals with progenitor cells. And again, 2019 data in which they used in a mouse model of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, they used bone marrow-derived progenitor cells to get a partial response. They were able to at least slow down the progression of something that when people are afflicted with it, well, they usually only go in one direction. And again, to remind you, bone marrow is where the stem cells are produced that then differentiate into progenitor cells and then our functional cells. We need a constant freshening, an upgrading of our functional cell pool. If not, well, we just get old and we die. Again, this is the data on Lou Gehrig's disease, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Really good data to indicate we should be testing this on people right now. Lou Gehrig's disease only goes in one direction. You deteriorate, at some point you can't even breathe anymore, and you just die. It's that simple. So there's no reason to not be testing these on Lou Gehrig's patients. Now, another study, again, 2019, these are very recent studies, indicate senolytics may very well be effective in treating Alzheimer's disease, at least in the mouse model. They did a study using senolytics, again, dasatinib and quercetin. They continued to use the same two-compound combination in order to see how well it works against a wide variety of diseases, and they were able to show some benefits in older mice with the Alzheimer's model built into them. It's not the same as people, but it nonetheless indicates that virtually every body system that we have can benefit by getting rid of those senescent cells. Major, major problem that we're faced with, and we're not doing enough about it. These were conclusions from that animal study, the animal model of Alzheimer's disease, where we could potentially, at a minimum, improve cognitive function in older people by using senolytics. Dasatinib and quercetin already available. We already have a dosage protocol, so we can do it safely, and more people should consider that sort of a self-experimental approach. Today's dilemma is heart failure, epidemic levels. There's no cure for it. It really only goes in one direction. Now, some people can improve it by using some medical and nutritional interventions, but eventually, if you don't die from something else, heart failure is going to kill that patient. Progenitor cell restoration and or renewal is a potential solution. It's a shame it's being overlooked. Again, we've got the senolytic dosage schedule used in two different studies, though a little bit different in the Mayo Clinic study compared to the one we did, but we've got good data to indicate safety and tremendous laboratory data to indicate efficacy. And I'm going to conclude with a slide from someone who I've long admired for his tireless work in identifying microbes. And it took a couple hundred years for others to figure out microbes were killing people, but if it was not for von Leeuwenhoek's early pioneering work, we might all still be dying from bacterial infections. So he wrote this letter to describe why he does what he does, and reflects a lot of why I do what I do. I like to disseminate information so that others can take advantage of that data, move the technology forward, and hopefully find a cure for aging in our lifetime. And that is my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.